Not like this, no. I'm always up for new experiences.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Looks like we're starting to get people joining us, so that's great. Let's give it a minute or so just for more people to join. It's only just 10 o'clock, so. I know it's only just 10 o'clock now, so I will give a few more minutes just to allow as many people to join us as possible. But welcome and great to see you all, and thanks for coming. Take a seat, as I say, and yeah, what you could do would be great for us is pop your the location you're coming from in the chat box. That would be awesome just to see how wide and far we're getting. I'm in Sydney, and I'll be introducing Eddie shortly, and Eddie is based in Adelaide, so we're both in Australia. So good to see we've got someone from Auckland and Sydney, Gold Coast, Sydney too, which is good to see. Wellington, oh, that's great. Lawrence at Tasmania as well, awesome. It's really good to see. So, well, look, thanks for joining, everyone. Hope you're having a good day or so far, wherever you are in the world. My name is Hugh Owen. I'm a community manager for our tech fests at Hanover Fairs. So I'm sure, and I know that we're definitely all faced with new challenges right now. And with the recent events that have changed our work and lives dramatically in such a short time, I know that it's really important to ensure that we will still all be able to come together. And once at the other end of when we come out of all this, which we will, we want to be ready to go both strategically, technically, and mentally. And I think that with the webinars that are available, we've done a few already which have gone well. And over the next few weeks, we've got a raft of amazing speakers that will also examine issues and share insights and hopefully inspire everyone in this current period. So, so yeah, we've got a few. So I think we'll start. Giving up people a few minutes to join. So. Well, I'd say so. So on to today's session. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat area. You know, we'll definitely address them, whether we address them straight away or at the end. It's up to how Eddie would like to interact with everyone. So look, we couldn't have a better title right now for this session. It's establishing the new normal and preparing for the other end. So we're really pleased to have Eddie Blass with us today. Eddie is the founder and CEO of Inventorium. Eddie has spent over 20 years in academia and was a professor in the leadership development before following a passion in re-engaging those who have disengaged from learning in order to create different futures for themselves. The Inventorium is an educational system designed for the 21st century, and as such is ahead of where education currently is today. So without further ado, I'm over to you, Eddie.
Thanks, Hugh. Thank you very much. And amazing to see so many people here from so many different places. I'm very fortunate to be coming to you from Adelaide, which is Ghana country, and I'd like to acknowledge the elders past and present to start. So thank you for joining us. I'm probably going to be a little bit controversial because I'm kind of known for doing that, so I hope I don't offend anybody. But really, when we're looking at the future and preparing for the other ends, sometimes that involves us making tough decisions now. So I'd like to start off by just thinking about how our mindset is coping with this situation that we're in at the moment. And I found it quite interesting because I was unfortunately involved in the bushfires this year as well. And the fires actually stopped 20 meters from my house. So my house was saved, which was amazing. And when I got home the morning after the main fires, discovered the house had no electricity. But was so happy to have a house that 4 days of living without electricity did not matter at all. Whereas previously, first world problem, you know, 2 hours without electricity, and I'd have been going up the wall as to you can't cook, can't do this, can't do the internet, whatever. But actually, when things are worse, coming back to a point of slightly better is an amazing thing on your mindset, and really makes you realize more what you've got than what you haven't. And one of the things that's really noticeable to me with this pandemic is how some people are focusing on what they've lost in terms of their freedoms and lack of control, and other people are reframing that into what they've got and what they've gained. And that's it's a really interesting positioning of things. And in particular for HR and for learning and development, because a lot of people are focusing on compliance, and schools, for example, online, that have gone online, or let's call it emergency response teaching. A lot of them are focusing on attendance, like attendance is meaningful, and it's completely not. It's actually, are the kids learning anything? And so there can be this, what's the word I'm looking for, this tendency to focus on what we can measure because we've always measured it and it's been the appropriate thing, as to not. So, for example, when I was getting ready this morning for this webinar, at one point I power dressed like I would have done if this was a live webinar. And then I sat down in front of my computer and felt really uncomfortable. So I went and got changed and put on something more casual and comfortable, because the medium of talking to people in their homes compared to talking to people from a stage is completely different. And so the assumption of, if I was sitting here really formally dressed in a suit, would people engage as much or not? So how do the even simple little things like how you present yourself online, how you talk to people online, whether you have that chit chat start off with at a meeting or not, how you're interacting with your team, all these assumptions change completely. And so the issue of how we manage things shifts enormously. Now, I appreciate a lot of you are not in Australia, but in Australia, the government's put out this thing called JobKeepers Allowance, which is for organisations to claim for employees that they would otherwise be letting go at the moment. And we've just got a quick poll. So if you're in Australia, or if you're not in Australia, but you've got something similar, could you just answer yes or no to whether or not you're accessing this? Because I'm just curious, it's a good measure of impact on your businesses as to whether or not you actually are able to access JobKeepers Allowance. It just gives me an idea of where people are at. So if you could do that poll now, please. It's come up on the screen.
Yeah, it should be there. I've just put my answer in.
And I'll just wait for the magic to happen and the results to appear. Can people see the poll?
Yeah, they should be, yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm not seeing anything. So
no, it should be. So,
okay, 41% of people are saying yes. Right. Okay, so that's let's just say it's approximately half of you. All right. So what will that basically what that indicates is that probably half of the businesses that are here today have suffered enough of a downturn because of the pandemic to be able to claim this, and also would be letting go of staff, which they're now keeping. Now, I've spoken to a number of people who are businesses that will be claiming JobKeepers, and what's been really interesting is the attitude of the staff, because some staff are saying, oh, well, if we're getting JobKeepers, we can just sit at home and do nothing. And that's really not the point, I get that when you're a restaurant or a bar and you've had to close and you physically can, you do not need waiting staff, but they could maybe do deliveries, or they could maybe work in the kitchens or something if you're doing takeaway. But this attitude of, oh, well, you can just pay me to stay at home and do nothing, I thought was very interesting. And it really made me reflect on how the role of HR shifts at the moment. Because more than ever, what this pandemic is going to show you is who your talent are and who is simply coming to work to do a job. And at the end of the day, when your business gets going again, you know, the chances are, if you're in the 50% that's seen enough of a downturn to get the job keepers, you're likely to come back in a contracted manner anyway. And, you know, how many people will you need to make redundant at the end of it anyway? And I'd be starting to create my criteria of selection for redundancy now. And I'd be starting to list people on how they're responding to things. Now, that is not to say that we shouldn't be sympathetic or empathetic or realistic about people's circumstances. That's completely different. Because where people have got circumstances that have made things particularly difficult, like maybe they're now looking after kids and their parents at home or things like that, you'll know about it. They'll tell you. They won't be saying, can I just be paid to stay at home? They'll be looking to support. And what you find is the people who are really motivated and committed to your organization will still be putting in the effort and getting the basis of their job done. They'll just do it differently. So this is also why I say the assumptions need to change. So whereas in a traditional workplace where people attended physically at work, we would, you know, like time in the office was pretty much something that you would know. And it becomes standard in a lot of places for people to put in the extra hours, after hours, or get in early. And, you know, you get these unwritten ground rules that is really how the organization operates. And if people don't play by those cultural rules, then, you know, they don't really fit in the organization. During this period of time, those unwritten ground rules have completely changed. So one thing, for example, that I always forgive my staff for and people for in meetings, if they've got kids at home and the kids come into the room and sit on their knee during the meeting, provided they don't interrupt, not an issue. Because you know what? Kids have got brains of their own, as do dogs and cats, you know. So if someone's cat suddenly jumps up, which mine has a habit of doing, you know, you can't really control that. You can push the cat away or whatever, but you end up having a fight with the cat rather than just letting it sit there. So long as they're not interrupting you, you know, you are asking people to work out of their homes. And there's always that lovely fallback position of that newscaster where the kid came in and someone came and grabbed them away. I'm sure you've all seen it on YouTube. You know, these things happen. And it is just a case of, you know, people are working from home, expect it, doesn't matter. You know, if they can put the kid in the knee and that shuts the kid up, that's fine. They're still concentrating on the meeting. So I think that type of flexibility needs to happen. The second thing is time management. And, you know, my company we teach disengaged teenagers. And one of the reasons that they stick with us, we don't make them get out of bed in the morning to start at 9 a.m. Get up when you're ready. You know, they're going to do 3 to 3.5 hours of solid learning a day. I don't care when they do it, right? The important thing is they do those 3 to 3.5 hours. You know, trying to get them to do maths at 9 a.m. isn't going to happen ever, right? And it's the same when you're working at home. Suddenly you haven't got school bell. You've not got the office regulation. You haven't even got the need to get out the house by, I don't know, 7 o'clock so that you avoid the traffic in order to get to work in time. You don't have any of these issues that form your daily routine. So once those have gone, the routine is completely changed and everybody needs to find their own routine. So you often find people who work from home won't start till 10. Not a big deal, just go with it. You know, change the assumptions. And the third thing then becomes one of shifting from compliance to enabling and really allowing people to show how they can achieve the outcome and the key results. Because when you think about your average working day in an office, and I know when, you know, when I'm in the office, when I go to a shared workspace or something like that, I'll spend hours chatting to people and just, you know, we call it networking and that's great. Or, you know, culture building or whatever, it's fine. But actually, how much work does somebody do in the day? And while they're sitting here at home working, you really want to get that concentrated effort into what they're doing. So it's really about focusing on what outcome is that person trying to achieve and are they achieving their key results? And if they are, I wouldn't be worrying about how they're doing it. You know, if it's good for them to work from 10 p.m. till midnight on documents and stuff, that's fine. Try and give everyone a 24-hour period in which to turn something around, to allow them that flexibility, because you do not know what their life circumstances are at the moment, so cater for the worst case scenario. Now, when you do all of that, what you'll find is the people who really are committed to your organization and motivated, and your real talent that you want to keep, will still get all the work done. You're not going to have the excuses. Give them the flexibility, give them the freedom, they're going to get the work done. Wikipedia are actually telling people they only expect them to work 50% of the hours that they would have worked normally and maintain the system, because they've not got all that chit chat going on and all that social side of things. And if people can work more, then great. But the reality is, for a lot of people, that social chit chat is now with their kids or their parents or whoever they happen to live with, their partners, who also have jobs. So, you know, there are all these issues as well. So really focus now on who the talent is that you want to keep. Okay, so we've got a comment that's very harsh. I know someone who's standing around because there's nothing to do. And as they care for elderly parents who are high risk, requested not to come in. Absolutely. But that's what I'm saying. You'll know. So they've said, can I not come in because I've got elderly parents and I'm standing around doing nothing? When there's something for me to do, call me and I'll come in. That's what I'm saying. They haven't said, can I just have the 1,500 to stay at home, please, and do nothing? Because isn't that what JobKeeper's for? So it's about how people phrase it and talk to you. And, you know, to a degree, it is harsh. And I always used to say this when I taught HR at universities. A lot of people go into HR because they think they like people. The reality is you go into HR because you don't like people. You know, because HR is about getting the most out of people and looking at them as a resource in terms of how do you manipulate is maybe too strong a word, but manage that resource and motivate that resource. You're trying to do what's good by them in order for them to be good by you. But if it's not good by you, you ain't going to be doing it. Yeah, so let's not fool around here with what the realities of being in HR is about. You know, at the end of the day, you want to be, as the HR person, creating the future organization for your organization to be the most successful it can be. And so that requires now that you identify who your real talent are. And it is, you know, it is about, you do have to be harsh. There is something about coping, people being able to cope and you understanding their resilience skills. When I worked for this international organization where, well, yeah, don't even ask me about the carbon footprint for a year and a half, but we would fly internationally, completely swap time zone, go from Australia to America, have to get off the plane and be functional. And it was a test of your resilience as to whether or not you could do it. And if you couldn't do it, you weren't resilient enough to work for that organization. And yeah, you know, very harsh. I get it. But sometimes those are the rules of the game. And I chose to leave that organization. I decided in the end it was too harsh. But that was then my choice. So that's the other thing to appreciate here, is that even though times are really difficult for an awful lot of people and none of the choices may be good, we do still have choices. It's very rare, unless we're in a totalitarian state, we do still have choices. And I know at the moment a lot of our choices have been taken away and that we can't choose to go to work, we can't choose to open our workplaces, but we can still choose where we want to work in our own homes. We can choose what hours we want to work. We can choose, you know, whether to phone colleagues and have a chat with them or not. You know, so there is still opportunities where we have choices, which starts to give us back control. And I get people really focusing on those choices, because the more we appreciate the choices we're making, the more in control of our lives we feel. So in terms of HR learning and development going forward, you need to be thinking about what choices do you want people to be making now, and giving them the opportunity to make those choices to see where they go with them in order to really think about the future organization for when this is over. To the point of, you know, and British Aerospace did this. This is like donkey's years ago, like 2 decades ago. British Aerospace had trouble with attendance in one of their factories up in the north of Scotland. And they put out a memo to say that they would be compiling a list of priority for redundancy based on attendance. And the list they'd be starting the list on Monday. And all weekend, you know, Friday, Monday, you know, sick leave, everyone taking sick on those that disappeared, white type, completely. Right. They never had any intention of making anyone redundant. So it was purely a manipulative memo on that basis. So I'm not suggesting that is good practice or anything at all. But actually, you know, when you outline and think about what is it you need for the future, then this is, you know, these are the starts of conversations and thinking that you start to have. Now, whether you want to let people know that you're going to be thinking about what, you know, what are the essential roles for your future and what aren't. You may find, for example, with this pandemic, that you have a whole layer of management that can do nothing because there's nothing for them to supervise, or there's, you know, they really aren't contributing anything other than phoning other people and disturbing them from their work. So the question then becomes, do you actually need that layer of management in the organization? I don't know. You don't always have to fire people, by the way, or make them redundant. You can redeploy. There are always other jobs and stuff. It's just thinking about what can we benefit from this pandemic in terms of the learning in our organizations and the learning about the people who are working for us. You know, I know people who've taken leave of absence, for example, because they find it was too hard to try and balance work and stuff. So they just said to their bosses, I can't do this. I've got 4 kids at home. I need to take leave of absence, and that's fine. And then they're not being paid because they've had that conversation with their boss. So their bosses decide to pay them 50% or whatever. And that's up to them and their boss. But it's about the honest conversations and trust. And what this pandemic gives us is the opportunity to really build trustful relationships. And when that doesn't happen, you need to be thinking about whether or not those people are the right people for your organization in the longer term. If you don't feel you can trust them now and they can't trust you, and you can't have those honest conversations during a pandemic and what's going to be about the worst situation any of us could imagine, then, you know, where is that relationship going with that employee in the long term? So this is what we mean by kind of recreating the rule book. You know, you almost like have to think about, all right, if the rule book was to be set today and this is our new way of working and this continues, and I suspect for a lot of organizations that are office-based and do not have physical contact with the customer in the actual workplace, I suspect there'll be quite a lot of people who are quite enjoying this way of working and might wish to continue with it afterwards. So you also need to be thinking about, are people more productive this way? And will you be wanting to let them work at home more when offices open again? Which actually has a longer term impact for the built environment if we don't need as much office space, for example. And another area that I've actually written to government, I don't expect to reply, but I often write them, with the idea of what would happen now if we flip the workforce. So in Australia, and I suspect we're a little bit unique in this, we've got about 25% of our workforce is casual workers, and most of them are young. So that's 25% of our working population, which, you know, that's probably the majority of the younger workforce is in casual employment contracts of one form or another, rather than ongoing permanent contracts. And yet a lot of the people that I know who are, well, let's say, would traditionally have been approaching retirement or early retirement in the good days when you could take early retirement at 55 instead of having to work to 65, who are actually quite enjoying working from home and working reduced hours. And so I wrote to government saying, has anybody done the modeling on if you were to retire everybody at 55 and pay the pension gap instead of paying unemployment and top ups to young people, but let them have the real career jobs, If you flip the economy that way, so you just hire people over 55 to see casuals when you need that extra expertise, experience, or extra numbers, what would that actually look like for the economy? Is that a better way to go than having 25% of the workforce casual who are young people? And most of them have more than one casual job to try and pay their way, and they still can't afford to leave home. So, you know, that's not a good economic model in terms of sustainability for the future anyway. So now's the time to think about that for your organization. What would happen, for example, how many of your workers are in the 55 plus bracket? And if you were to employ them casually, what would it look like if you could then take on more younger people? That type of modeling, you know, would it cost the company? Would it be better for the company? What would be involved? Or would it be an absolute disaster? And it might be an absolute disaster. But this is the time to ask these types of questions, because this is the time that you've got to start to restructure and think about what next. This is a golden opportunity for HR to really think about what you want the organization of the future to be to meet your organization's needs. And how can you use this opportunity to mold that? You've got time to train people. You've got time to give people different opportunities and see what they do. You've got time to really test out who really is self-motivated and self-driven, or who needs someone standing there cracking the whip. These are all the things that you can find out now. And so the last thing that I really want to raise before opening it up for questions, I usually say questions, comments, and abuse, but I'm aware I've been quite hard, so I might not ask for abuse, is the issue of work-life balance and the kids and stuff. And I think that, again, what this pandemic has shown us is that a lot of us quite like the work-life balance of not having to travel to work, of being able to, I don't know, just have those extra couple of hours in bed to sleep. I certainly know I'm loads healthier for sleeping an extra hour. Can't believe what a difference an extra hour of sleep is making to me. Just in terms of like my skin and everything is just, you know, I'm aware that I look healthier, and really I work at home anyway, but because I do online teaching and stuff, but I often go out for meetings, and often people like a 9 o'clock meeting, so I have to travel out for a 9 o'clock meeting and back. All of that's gone. Any meetings are now online, so I don't have that travel element at all. And so, you know, that really makes people think about their work-life balance. I met someone walking my dogs in the park the other day. I met this gentleman who works in the aerospace industry, so he's at home doing nothing because, you know, as you know, most planes are grounded. And he just said to me, I'm loving this. He said, I've discovered cooking. I'm really enjoying walking my dog instead of it being a chore. He said, I appreciate that I'm about to have a massive income cut. He said, but I'm also amazed at how little I need to spend when I'm living my life this way compared to all the costs associated with working. You know, I did a quick survey of some of my friends last night as to when did you last fill up with petrol. Nobody's done it this month, and we're 23rd of April already. So the last time anyone filled up with petrol was in March, and you know, normally we're all like every week at the petrol station because we're whinging about the prices. So there's a lot of cost savings in working from home as well, and a lot of flexibility, and you know, people actually spending time with their kids and enjoying that extra time. I know it gets to a point sometimes where they're ready to kill the kids and wish them to go back to school because of the interruptions on some days, but that's not every day, you know. So I think it's about not making assumptions about what this is like for everyone as well. You may be finding it hard, or you may be finding it really good, but that doesn't mean everybody else is finding it really hard or really good. So there's a lot of need to check in with people. And also, you know, we kind of go through that peculiar process of grieving when we have a large change like this. So people, first of all, are like very gung-ho, and then they get a little bit into denial, and then they get angry. And then getting them out of that angry phase, you know, it's when they become keyboard warriors on Facebook and stuff. Getting them past that is a really important role for HR, is help you, if you've got people who are stuck in the angry stage, that's when management comes in and just helps them see a good way forward from this. But don't assume you know what that will be, because it will be different for everyone. It's just trying to have the conversation with them, the trustful conversation as to what is a good way forward for them. You know, and some people may be feeling really insecure about their job, in which case you just need to give them the reassurance that at the moment their job is safe. At the moment. You're not making any promises in the future, but just make them feel that if it's not going to be safe, you're going to be the first to give them heads up. So they will at least have some time to prepare for that. And then you actually have to make a note of that, so you do give them that heads up and you do have those conversations and you don't ignore them, because that again builds the trust. And if there's one thing I've learned in my career, it's everybody remembers how they leave an organization. Nobody remembers how you join it, but everyone will remember how you leave. And that's whether you're HR, you'll remember people who leave badly, and the person that leaves will remember if it's a bad exit. And I can honestly say there's only one organization I've ever worked for that I could not go back to tomorrow, that I left badly. And that's, you know, and I sort of regret that, but, you know, I don't think I'd go back to work for any of them, to be honest, but knowing that I can is a good option to have. And that's how you want to leave it, so that if you do end up terminating employment relationships at the moment, the door is open for both parties, that can be reversed in the future. That's the ultimate that you're trying to achieve in any severance at the moment, whether it's a temporary severance or a permanent severance. So you think it's going to be a permanent severance, always try and leave doors open. Okay, so I've talked for half an hour. I'm going to open the floor for questions, comments, thoughts, and abuse. If there's abuse, I can take it.
Well, I hope there's not abuse, because that was good, Eddie. Thanks very much. See if we got any questions. Not be shy. Well, while we're waiting, I've got a question. I was going to say, you sort of say it's a golden opportunity for HR and L&D to mould what the new looks like. Is there what's the I guess the tool that's going to be most useful in doing that process? Is it a case of getting the top management in your decision, or from an HR professional's perspective, how much influence do you think they would have over moulding it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And this is where I think mindset comes into it a lot. And one of the things that I learned with teaching early on is people said to me, why is it when you walk into a classroom, the kids shut up? You know, or you walk into a lecture theatre and everyone shuts up and they can't get kids shut up. And I just assume that they will. Right? And so because I've got that assumption, it happens. And so I think there's something about, once you've got your model for what the future organization will be, you need to assume that's going to be the accepted model, and you start doing everything and living that now. And just those subtle changes in your attitude, because that's your future vision. You can even write it up and put it on your wall. Every decision you make, every question you get asked, you answer with respect to that vision. You start to create that vision happening. Whether or not you've had to present it and get agreement or not, you know, that's the vision. And then gradually you start shifting the practice of the organization, even to the point that you then do, you get the management buy-in and stuff. But it's, if you're sure that that's what needs to happen, you start living it now. And once you start living it, people will come along. Probably not as fast as you'd like, but they will start to come along, because you start to become predictable and people get certainty in the way that you're driving things. And so people like certainty and they'll latch onto it. So I'll ask a question of you guys then, if nobody's going to ask me. What would you say is your biggest problem at the moment? What's keeping you awake? What's keeping you awake at night? Type it into the chat.
I know for me, it's just the uncertainty of everything at the moment. Well, obviously we work in the events industry, and for me, it's not about working from home or anything along those lines. It's about what is our new normal gonna be, and there is that uncertainty for everyone. But that's the thing for me.
But I think in the events industry, so even then there's still some certainty, okay? You pretty much know there's not going to be large events for the rest of the year. So you can be certain of that. So you're going to have to experiment with online and see how it works. And that's new, so you're going to have to start getting lots of feedback and talking to people, and even you know, phone up some of the people who've been here today and ask them what works and what didn't, what would they like more of, what would they like less of. If there'd been a poll or a questionnaire or something in advance, would they have preferred it more? Would they like that, you know, do they want to ask questions and then you find speakers to answer those questions? All that type of thing can then shape how you take the events forward. And then you might find, so if people want question-driven events, that might be something that you do afterwards on a face-to-face basis. Rather than you choosing the speakers, they nominate what the question is, and then you have to find someone to answer it, or a panel or something like that. So it's still different.
Yeah, I guess controlling what you can control really is what matters.
But also it's taking that control and visioning how you can make that the best possible thing, and then living that now, you know. So it's almost like, and then when things come back offline or online, whichever, you know, in terms of like you can open venues and stuff, then you can add to it if you need to. By then, you know, people might prefer this type of thing to going attending something. So I'm just looking, so there's a couple of questions come up. Thinking as things ramp back up, thoughts on the war for talent and the strategy. I would say thoughts on the war for talent. Talented people like to work with talented people. So it's about keeping the right people now. And the one thing talented people hate is working with laggers. And sadly, harshly, horribly, whatever, this is going to give you an opportunity to find who some of your laggers are. And if you're in the situation where you need to downsize at the end of this, you know who your laggers are to get rid of. And that will bring more talent into your organization in the longer term future. So I would focus firstly on identifying your own talent. Secondly, keeping them. Thirdly, getting rid of any non-talent who are pulling your talent down or blocking them. And then allowing your talent to bring in the future talent, because they will attract people. And 60% of jobs evidently go through word of mouth anyway. So, you know, you tend to bring people into the organization who are good. But keeping your talent at the moment is the most important thing. And that's about building the trust and giving them the flexibility, because your talent will produce your key results. So I would really move to only measuring and managing objectives and key results. And that's it. Forget about time on task, anything else. You know, what's the objective and the key result, and are they achieving it? And then let them do it in their own way. Move off of any, move off as much compliance as you can without breaching health and safety. Okay, transition back into the physical workplace and what this will look like. I appreciate your comments about the fact that this will be individual for everyone. Yeah, and look, that transition back into the physical workplace. So I think that even people who are really looking forward to getting back into the physical workplace are going to hate it when they first get there. Partly because they're going to expect it to be back to how it was, and it won't be. Because during this period, it's going to be like 3 to 6 months minimum of people working from home. People will have changed. You know, in a 6-month period, think about the different experiences you'll have had of life. Some people will have lost people, others won't. Some people will have had kids at home, others won't. You know, all these things will change who you are and how you find this experience. So you're going to return to the workplace as a different person to the person that left it. And so that you'll almost need to get to know each other again and reestablish new norms, because it's amazing how quickly you can shift the norms. And it's back to those unwritten guidelines of how the workplace operates. And I suspect some people will have found, so I kind of joke that all those introverts in the world, like myself, are discovering how extrovert we are, and that, you know, we are actually missing some people. Whereas extroverts at the moment are dying because they cannot get that energy from other people. And I think when you go back into the workforce, that's going to be even more apparent, as the extrovert's going to be craving the energy from others, and the introvert's going to be like, whoa, back off. You know, leave me alone. I like the peace and quiet in my space, because we've had the opportunity to have that more. You know, I know people who hate working from home. They're absolutely hating it. Can't wait to get back into the workplace, just for having the energy of other people around. And then, you know, I also know a lot of people who are saying, oh, it's just bliss. And so, you know, when you do go back to the physical workplace, and that's why I say you may find not as many people want to go back, and maybe building in that flexibility so that people only have to go in 2 days a week or something like that to maintain some of this working from home could be a way to do it. And also, you know, some people will have ongoing childcare issues and others won't. And so it's going to be a dribble back as well. Not everyone's just going to suddenly turn up on the Monday that the offices are allowed to open. Yeah. So all of that will need to be managed. So, yeah. Okay, somebody's put up, I'm seeing my redundancy and opportunity to have authentic conversations with my network like never before. Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, this is also the chance to try, to really try out and test new ideas if ever you thought of having a startup, because you've got nothing to lose now, nothing to lose. The world is in this very peculiar situation. So you can throw ideas out there and people can go, yeah, you're just having a crazy moment or whatever. And people, you know, and other people go, yeah, that's a brilliant idea, and you can get going. So great that you see it as an opportunity like that. And, you know, I always think redundancy is a huge opportunity for people. I think some people worry about it because they think, you know, what happens after, and if they can't get a job. But, you know, there's always voluntary work that needs to be done, and the contacts and connections you make doing voluntary work and networking in that sector can often open up doors in ways that you would never expect. Plus you feel really good about yourself and you get to meet some very amazing people, and it's that whole social enterprise area is really starting to develop out of this as well.
Well, great, thank you, Eddie. It looks like that's all the questions we have for the time. If there's any further questions,
one other person's put up mental health and welfare of the team. Okay, so mental health is a huge issue, and look, there's a degree to which we can help people with their mental health and provide services and look out for them and point out to them when we feel their mental health is in need of addressing. But there is a limit as to boundaries that you can cross. Ideally, and this comes back to the trusted relationship thing, is if you're having conversations with people so that they can say, do you know what, I've just actually had a really bad week and I'm sorry, I've not been the most productive, I've just felt really down about everything. Then actually being able to have that conversation and being told, yeah, you know, that happens, don't worry about it. Take the weekend off, get lots of sleep, read a book, go for lots of walks, see how you feel on Monday. The chances are on Monday they'll start to pick up again. Whereas if they're worried that they can't have that conversation with you, then it's worse. And, you know, I think everybody is going through ups and downs. Everyone's become bipolar with this pandemic. You know, there are triggers that just hit people off, and, you know, the news and everything. So a couple of points that I would suggest to everybody, if you can, a sort of recommendation to your whole workforce: reduce the amount of time everybody spends on Facebook. Because Facebook is having an incredibly negative effect on people in terms of pulling them down with the same stories and depressing situations. It's not a happy place. And also, you know, only get people to watch the news once a day, maximum. Because it's almost like the weight of everything that's going on just pulls you down, whatever. I used to wake up in the morning, look at my phone first thing. I would always check what happened, watch the BBC News.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
See what's happened the other side of the world before I get out of bed. I've stopped doing that, right? Now I get up, I take my dogs for a walk, I have a shower, I do my exercises, I have my breakfast, and then I switch on to what's going on in the world. And that's given me time to just, set my mindset before I take on all the crap that happened overnight. Because at the moment there is no good news. So the good news is only 495 people died in Britain, not 600. It's great news, yeah. So it's, even good news now is depressing. So I think, in terms of mental health, limiting some of those communications, sending out a happy company message every day can be good. Funny memes, that type of thing, sharing, setting up a social network somewhere, but Slack, whatever, but sharing some of the hilarious videos that are circulating on YouTube and other social media can be really good. I mean, I saw this meme of, it said, someone interviewing someone, and it said, what new skill have you learned during this pandemic? And it was a woman with her head in a teapot blowing the tea out the spout and trying to catch it with the cup. And I mean, we were crying with laughter, but we all went, it. It was hilarious. And so it's like with them posting all these videos of us trying to do this, water going everywhere, right? But that type of thing became a really funny, team challenge from nothing, and you'd never do it in the office. But that's where the rules change. But it just brought everyone together as a team and made it, like kind of funny and yeah. So
I agree. I think there's taking the humour out of some of these situations can help, especially for me anyway. It's obviously there's a line and stuff, but look, Eddie, thank you very much for that. That was really great. Really appreciate you sharing that with us. If there's any questions, anyone you can reach out to me, or I'm sure Eddie wouldn't mind if you reached out on LinkedIn or whatever. Look, appreciate everyone joining us, and we will be doing some more webinars probably next week. Stay safe, everyone, and I'm glad that we were able to come together and share today. So thanks very much, and
thank you,
Eddie.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.